The AFC North is truly at a crossroads, a division defined by rigid, consistent continuity, right? As a Browns fan, we've been beaten over the head with this continuity. Every time we fire a coach, that's not what Pittsburgh does. That's not what Cincinnati does. That's not what Baltimore does. This is why we're not like those teams. But the last 5 years, every single team, I've been trying to find a stat on this, but I think every team has had the same coach for 5 years, and I think that's the longest any division in the NFL has done that, right? Like, I can't think of anything else. But to help me discuss this conversation, but from the lens of the Pittsburgh Steelers, the team that everybody swears could never have this conversation. I know Rich Eisen somewhere, his spidey sense is tingling. He's hearing people talk about firing Mike Tomlin, and he's like, "Oh, gotta write the monologue. Gotta call Steeler fans crazy for even thinking about it." But in order to talk about this, we have Jared Bailey. You know him from AFC North Talk. He does a lot of other stuff on the Believe in Steelers network. Man, appreciate you being on here today. But yeah, the Mike Tomlin situation in Pittsburgh, it feels like more and more people are waking up and realizing that y'all been on the same ride for a very long time.
Yeah, and most Steelers fans would tell you that like we've been having this conversation. Like some of them like back in 2017 after the playoff loss to Jacksonville, where some were like, all right, maybe this thing has like really hit its peak at this point. So hindsight being 2020, this conversation's been going on in Pittsburgh for 8 years, and I think nationally it's starting to heat up at least a little bit because at least now we see people like Dan Hanzus from Heed the Call, Greg Rosenthal, who's like pointing out, all right, maybe this could be, maybe this should be a situation where both parties go their separate ways, and there's only so much I can keep saying about it. I feel like I've said the same thing over and over for like a year and a half, 2 years now. But it is frustrating, man, when you are a fan of a team, and like I know a lot of Browns fans are gonna say, "Oh, you're frustrated," and I'm like, I get it, I totally get it. But from the just the lens of a Steelers fan, it is frustrating watching it's like watching the same movie over and over again, right? This is just The Hangover Part 2. It's the same movie. I don't know why we keep watching it.
It's not even a groundbreaking movie, right? Like it's like
no.
It's like the one where they went to Beijing, or
right? Yeah, it's not right? It's not like they made a second. It's not like if Interstellar had a sequel. Like no, this is a bad movie that they keep making sequels of for whatever reason, and like we still watch it every Sunday because we're all sick in the head and we all hope that things change, and it just never seems to go that way. And here we are again. They were 4-1, and now they're staring 4-4 in the face. So yeah, man, it's a hard watch.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing too, because paired on top of the regular season stuff is the fact that the Steelers, I think, they're one of the longest playoff win droughts in the NFL, right? At this point, they're definitely they have won the least recently of all the AFC North teams, because I think the last playoff win was 2016, 2015? Was it?
Yeah,
was it the Bengals?
Would have been 2016. They beat Miami that year. It would have been the 2016 season, I believe, because they beat Miami that year. And then the 2017 season, they got the first round bye because they had the 1 or the 2 seed. I think they would have had the 2 seed. And then they lose to Jacksonville because they were very much riding off the Jaguars and looking ahead to New England. And then Jacksonville obviously beats them, puts up 45 points on them. Oh, it was horrible.
Yeah. And I think it's what's been fascinating about watching this develop is like just how strong, and this is no disrespect to Mike Tomlin. Obviously, Mike Tomlin has built up a level of respect within the media for a reason, because he is competent at his job at the very least, or at least gives off the appearance of being very competent at his job at the very least.
Right.
But it's like, he's the only guy in the NFL who cannot win a playoff game for that long while being in the playoffs consistently that entire stretch of time, that nobody's going to look at sideways and just focus on the fact that he's been in the play. Like, there's really not that much different between him and Mike McCarthy when you really, really think about it.
No.
Like, but the way that people view Mike, like even me, like the ideal of hiring Mike Tomlin, I'm more interested in that inherently than the ideal of hiring Mike McCarthy. But I'm like, this is an identical conversation. Like the problems you have with Mike are the same things that you have with the other Mike.
And at least with Mike McCarthy, like his offenses were good with Dallas, and that whole thing was dumb from the start with Jerry. Like they knew that he was on the last year of his deal. They didn't let other teams interview him, and then his contract runs out, and they don't renew him. Like it was just a whole big stupid thing. But Mike McCarthy did a good job in Dallas. Every year that Dak was healthy, they won north of 10 games, were consistently in the postseason. He just hit the same wall that every other coach in Dallas hit, apparently, which is the inability to get to the NFC Championship game. But Mike McCarthy, man, like has a Super Bowl, beat Mike Tomlin to get his Super Bowl, similar win-loss records, similar playoff records. Like for some reason, Mike McCarthy gets crapped on a lot while Mike Tomlin gets like universally praised. I've never understood that.
It's truly because the whole never going under 500 thing. Like,
correct.
People are so fascinated with that. I am like, maybe, look, I'm a natural born hater. I'm a Browns fan. So, like, I'm always going to be looking to poke holes in, like, stuff that Steelers fans hold dear. But for me, for that 500, that over 500 thing, first of all, it gets characterized as like they're always going 9-8, but they're rarely going 9-8. Or what would be the equivalent before they switched to 17 games? What, 9-7?
9-7,
yeah. But it's like, the thing with Pittsburgh has been like they've just been living on the margins and being successful on the margins. And part of that is like they've had A-tier field goal kicking, right? Like just incredible field goal kicking. Or offensively, for whatever reason, even when it doesn't make sense that they're able to, they can keep turnovers down. Right, like Kenny Pickett didn't turn the ball over that much in Pittsburgh, and that was like the one claim to fame. We're living the same thing with like the whole Dylan Gabriel thing, right? Like that's our Kenny Pickett. It's a conversation, but it's funny because he technically beat out Kenny Pickett for the backup job at camp. Yeah, so it's fascinating how things that get people fired everywhere else, it just has worked for Pittsburgh to the level to where they don't go under 500, and that has kept him safe from all of these conversations. But like, let's kind of dig deeper on the conversation about why it is like this. Because when I hear you talk about Mike Tomlin, I think the number one complaint you have is he has an outdated philosophy of winning, right? I think that's something that you've brought up a lot. What do you mean when you say that?
Well, when you look at the way that he wants to win, it's the things you pointed out. It's, playing safe, living and dying by the defense, limiting teams to scoring points rather than you trying to like outscore opponents. And it's, relying a lot on splash play turnovers that isn't sustainable. When you go back to the 2008 season when they won the Super Bowl, the offense wasn't great. Like obviously they had Ben, and when it came down to, all right, we need like a big play, a big drive, Ben usually gave it to them. But if you go by like the DVOA of Super Bowl winners, the 2008 Steelers are pretty low on that list. They weren't a great offense. Defensively, though, they were, top 2 in just about every category. And that's great. Like, that's certainly a big reason why they won that Super Bowl as well as the 2005 Super Bowl. But you can't win in 2025 the same way that you won in 2008. The game's changed so much over the last 20 years. The offense is more important than defense in this day and age. I think that we would both agree on that. Like we saw with Pat early on in his career, the defense in Kansas City used to be god awful, but Pat still got them to a couple of AFC title games before Spags got there. And now the defense is very good on top of the offense being great. And then they just became this machine. But even before then, like the Chiefs overcame bad defense.
It's easier to overcome bad defense
correct.
If you have a great offense than it is for a great defense to overcome bad offense. Like it's just
correct.
Easier.
And that's the thing that Mike Tomlin has failed to realize or failed to accept is that it's not a low scoring league anymore. And again, you could win that way in 2008 because it was like right at the beginning of like the quarterback takeover and the passing game takeover where like the only like 2 guys that you're really worried about were Peyton and Tom. Like there wasn't like this horde of quarterbacks that were just out of this world. Like
there was a gap between like the 2004 draft and then like 2017 where we really were like deprived of quarterbacks. Like I think maybe Cam entered the league and then Andrew Luck, but there wasn't really like there's been classes in the last 10 years where there's been like 4 guys legitimately entered the league from those classes. 4 guys might have emerged over 10 years in that era where Mike Tomlin came to prominence. And I think that's really like kind of fossilized his ideology, for lack of a better word.
And that's the big thing, man, is that, we've seen so many quarterbacks come into the league, specifically in the AFC over the last decade or so with Mahomes and Burrow and Josh Allen, Lamar. Like all of the, if not all, like the majority of like the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL reside in the AFC. And so when you're strolling in with Kenny Pickett and just saying, that's fine, we'll limit these other teams from scoring, like Patrick Mahomes is going to get his against whoever he plays. Josh Allen's going to get his against whoever he plays. The Steelers have played well against Baltimore, but you and I both know it's a little bit different when you're playing a divisional opponent. You know them a little bit better. It's easy to figure them out, as compared to a team that you don't play every year. And even then, Lamar over the last 2 games against Pittsburgh has played well. So even he is starting to like get his feet under him in terms of playing the Steelers and figuring out, okay, this is how you beat them and this is how I can, play good against them. So in that regard, they've just like put the offense on the back burner for a long time. And, obviously with Matt Canada being there for a while, way longer than he should have been. Prior to him, Randy Fichtner wasn't great, but he still had like the back end of Ben Roethlisberger, who like Ben wasn't top 10 quarterback Ben anymore, but he was still Ben Roethlisberger and would get them out of situations. So the offense got put on the back burner a lot. And even when you look at the roster right now, the offensive roster isn't good, but Arthur Smith's actually done a pretty good job with that unit. And now the defense has fallen apart because they're old. They paid a lot of old guys that haven't lived up to those contracts. And the young guys that are good, like Nick Herbig, he can't see the field the last 2 weeks. So it's just coaching malpractice right now. And the years of being stuck in the past really caught up with them. And they're getting better in terms of like I said, Arthur Smith's done a really good job with the offense, bringing in Aaron Rodgers, like a real quarterback to have. That's good. But they still don't have, top tier weapons outside of Metcalf. And even then DK is a little bit inconsistent when it comes to that. But the whole overarching issue is that Mike Tomlin hasn't innovated. He hasn't evolved. He's been stuck in his ways. And that's really hurt them when it's come to playing good teams.
I'm going to continue my interview with Jared Bailey in just a minute, but real quick, I want to thank my sponsor, Sleeper. All right, so I got my Sleeper picks in this week. Now, the Browns are on a bye week, so because the Browns are on a bye week, we got to do things a little different. I thought what would be fun here is to give Browns fans a full break from NFL football and talk about some picks that we think could hit when it comes to college football. And we're going to do this with quarterbacks that we have talked about potentially being in the 2026 draft class. So for my picks this week, after looking at all of the picks available on Sleeper, and by the way, if you want to join the fun, make sure you use the promo code WORSTTAKE when you join Sleeper. Get up to $100 match. Get $100 match on up to $100 when you join Sleeper with that promo code. So first, we got Brendan Sorsby, 275 yards. I think he's going to get more than that playing against Utah. It's going to be a late game, 10:15 p.m., but I think he will be able to succeed. From what I hear about Brendan, he has some of the best tools of all the quarterbacks in college football, and he is very, very interesting and exciting to watch. Fernando Mendoza, he is right now my QB1 of this class. They have him at 19.5 rushing yards. I'm going to go up here. Fernando likes to run the ball, and when he does run the ball, he does not slide a ton. He likes to be aggressive. He uses it as something to kind of get his guys motivated, and I think he'll have more than 19 rush yards versus Maryland. Lenore Sellers, they have him at 28.5 rushing yards. I'm going to say more here. South Carolina start to lean more on Lenore Sellers' rushing abilities in their game against Alabama. They actually found some success doing that. I think they'll continue to do that. And then Darian Mensah out of Duke playing Clemson today. Well, not today, but Saturday at noon. I have him over a passing touchdown and a half, so 2 passing touchdowns. He's been lighting it up. He's been a fun guy to watch. But those are our picks, the 2025, 2026 draft. And if you want to join the fun, make sure you join Sleeper. Use the promo code Worst Take. What do you get to the argument? Because like we hear it in Cleveland a little bit whenever people talk about firing Kevin. And I imagine it's a much more severe argument when you hear it is, it could be so much worse than Mike Tomlin. Like what would your response be to people who kind of reflexively respond to any call to get rid of Mike Tomlin with the concern of it being worse?
That it could be a lot better than Mike Tomlin too. If you just keep beating your head against the same wall because you're afraid of change, like it's pretty cowardly as an organization. And it shows that your words say one thing, but your actions say another. Like Art Rooney can express how much he wants to end the playoff drought as much as he wants. If his actions don't back that up, then the narrative is going to be that he's competent with elite mediocrity. And until he shows that that's not fact, that's what the narrative's going to be. Sure, could it be a lot worse than Mike Tomlin? Absolutely. But it could also be a lot better. You could bring in one of these up-and-coming offensive-minded head coaches, or go the Texans route and bring in a guy like DeMeco Ryans, who is a defensive-minded head coach, but a forward-thinking defensive mind who has had one of the best defenses in football since he's been in Houston, but brought a lot of offensive minds with him to run the offense. And that first year in Houston, it really worked. Even for bits of the second year, it worked, and then a lot of guys got hurt. They move on from Bobby Slowick because of schematic stuff. But that thought process is also fine. If you bring in a defensive-minded head coach that knows, all right, I'm going to give the reins of the offense to my offensive staff and let them work with their ideas. There's a lot of things that can be done that are better than Mike Tomlin. And again, you look at just all of the up-and-coming names, maybe like a Josh Grizzard in Tampa Bay, anybody coming up from the McVay, Shanahan, LaFleur trees that are going to be given shots at some point. Even if you want to go to the McVay tree and you want that defensive mind, bringing over like a Chris Shula and then having him bring some of that staff with him, like there's a lot of different things that you could try. This past year they had a golden opportunity to maybe try that. If the Steelers' job had become available, I mean, if you're Ben Johnson, would you have gone to Chicago still, or would you have gone to Pittsburgh? And I can only speak for myself and say I'd probably go to Pittsburgh, with some sort of, we say what we want about the Steelers, but there's a little bit more stability there than there is in Chicago. That would have been the more attractive job to me. So I think that they would have had ample opportunities to upgrade at head coach. Mike Vrabel, I think that would have been an upgrade at head coach. And we look at, see what he's doing right now with Josh McDaniels in New England. There's a lot of different routes that you could go to improve at head coach. And again, I understand it could be worse. It surely could. But it could also be much better. And nothing is going to change in Pittsburgh if nothing is going to change, if they just keep beating their head against the same wall.
Yeah. So what do you think, like, there's a question of, like, what would it even take for Mike Tomlin to get fired in Pittsburgh, which I don't know the answer to because they seem very committed to the ideal of, like, sticking with him. But let's like stay down this lane of, like, if they stay with Tomlin. How do you get to a quarterback? How do you get to the next era of quarterback with the approach that they have at each season, which is let's stay above water, let's give ourselves a shot in the playoffs, and let's see what happens, which I think is a fine strategy when you have Joe Burrow or Lamar Jackson, or you have one of those guys who can get hot and then just take you to a championship. When you're relying on, like, it's not as bad with Aaron as it was when you tried it last year with, like, Russ, right? Where you knew that wasn't gonna work. What was it, Kenny, and then Kenny and Mason,
Mitch Trubisky and Mason Rudolph. Yeah.
So it's like it's not as bad this year, but it's like it's still probably gonna give you a similar result here. Like, age is gonna catch up to him. You're asking him to play probably road playoff games in Buffalo in the snow. Like, it's just gonna catch up with them, right? Like, whether it's been like a sneaky factor in Aaron Rodgers' career his whole time. But all that aside, it's like, how do they even get to the place of like having a new era at quarterback if they're constantly aiming to pick at like pick 19?
Well, I mean, we've seen it with other good teams in the past where, like, when the Chiefs had Alex Smith and they were kind of in a similar spot that the Steelers are right now, they traded up to get Mahomes.
Mm-hmm.
The Bills went to the postseason the year before they drafted Josh Allen. So I think that that's kind of the mindset that they have, and that's why they did so much to try to garner as much comp picks as possible. They have 2 third-round picks right now because of the George Pickens trade. Depending on playing time, they could have had another comp pick, I believe, from one of the Justin Fields or Russell Wilson deals. They're not going to get that now. But they're going to have a few day 3 comp picks that they could use as trade bait. I think Alex Highsmith is going to be a trade candidate as well. At least he would be for me, just because he's the 3rd best edge rusher that they have behind Watt and Nick Herbig. So they're going to have to move up, assuming that they do finish in that range of like 19 to 24, depending on what the playoff situation looks like. They're going to have to move up. And I think that they know that, because that's, the model that they've built for themselves is consistently at least being in the hunt. And so, yeah, they're going to have to pull what Kansas City did when they moved up from Mahomes. They're going to have to do what Buffalo did when they traded up for Josh Allen. So the Bills traded up twice to get Josh Allen. So if they think that they got to be that aggressive to do that, then that's what they're going to do. But I don't think that you can just sit on your hands if you're picking at 23 and hoping a guy that you like falls to you, because if it's a good quarterback, he's going to go before then. The Giants traded back up in the first round for Jackson Dart and got him at 26, and he looks pretty good. But when it comes to, the best quarterbacks in football, man, I mean, you look at all of them: Pat, Joe, Josh, Lamar, all of these starting caliber quarterbacks, all these good quarterbacks. I think like half of the starters, probably more than half in the NFL right now, were first round picks. And so it's got to be a guy, statistically speaking, that goes in the first round. Like Dak is a 4th round pick. That's a statistical anomaly. Purdy being the last pick in the draft, that will probably never happen again. So many people are like, oh, what about Will Howard? Like, Will Howard wasn't drafted to be the future of the Pittsburgh Steelers. If he ends up being a good backup, that's a job well done. But statistically speaking, they got to hit on a guy in the first round if they want to find that guy. If it means trading up, then it means trading up.
Yeah. Do you trust that the organization's going to have to follow through on that? Like that's my, like, it's because we're talking about being like really aggressive here, maybe even jumping into the top 10, like to go get a quarterback. And they've like, to give the Steelers credit, they've done that before with like Devin Bush and
that was the big one. Yeah,
Devin Bush. So it's like, it's not like they're unwilling to do it, but in a market that's more competitive than it would have been to trade up to 10 for a linebacker, right? We're talking about quarterback, where there's probably going to be another team or two kind of like ringing up the same phones. Do you think they're going to be able to answer that competition and like, win that competition, go get that pick? If it means that they have to be a little bit more aggressive than maybe what they have in their charts?
Yeah, I mean, the Browns are going to be in that conversation. The Rams are going to be in that conversation because both of them have 2 first-round picks next year. Both
and the Rams don't give a damn about them picks.
No, they do not. And Stafford's not going to be around forever. He's still playing great football, but he's not going to be around forever. He was pondering retirement this past offseason. So those are 2 teams that I fully expect to be in on quarterbacks. And I would probably say they're probably going to get into the top 10 to do it. So if you're Pittsburgh and there's another guy that you like, if you have the ability to trade up to 12 or 13, then that's probably the range I see them going. I don't know if they're going to be able to get into the top 10 to do it, simply because the Browns and Rams both have other first round picks. Pittsburgh does not. So it'll be tricky, but I think that if they can even move up to the 10 to 15 range, that's probably fine. I don't think they're going to, jump into the top 5, top 7. I think Cleveland can do that because it looks like they're probably going to be sitting with one of those picks anyway. And let's say they're drafting 6th and they want to jump up to 2 or 3, then they have the ammunition to do that. The Rams, if they wanted to jump to, around 8 and they're picking, 23, depending on what Atlanta does, right now it looks like they're going to be somewhere in the middle. If you trade 26 and pick 16 to get to 8, that's probably a deal that a team would do. So there's just other teams with more firepower than them right now in terms of jumping that high. But if they can get a guy that they like by moving to, 11, 12, 13, then I think that's doable.
What do you think it would take for Tomlin to get fired? I know what it would take for like you to finally lose your patience, which is like,
Sure.
I know I joke about it. It's like the Tua trade, right? Like the big swing is like, we're going to go swing on Tua, right? Like I feel like it would have to take something like that and then that not working for the Steelers to be like, okay, the dam's broke. We're not 500 anymore. We got to move on. Like realistically, other than just like, because other than that, you're kind of just hoping that he retires, but he's not going to retire anytime soon or resign. Like, so like, what do you think actually ratchets up the temperature for him in Pittsburgh for him to get fired? Because I think of all the coaches here that people have a good argument to get rid of, I think Tomlin's probably the safest.
Yeah, I would agree. I can't remember if it was Andrew Filipponi or Chris Mueller from 93.7 The Fan in Pittsburgh who posted this, but their one scenario is that Rooney puts a little bit of pressure on Tomlin and says, look, you're firing Terrell Austin and you're going to bring in somebody to run the defense. This isn't going to be something where you have or full hands on with it. You're going to hire somebody to take over this because it's not working. And if he says no, and there's pushback, then Rooney could say, okay, well, we're going to move on then. We'll call it a resignation. We're not going to say that we fired you, but this isn't working anymore. And if you're not willing to do that, then we just can't do this anymore. Mm-hmm. That's a scenario that is possible, I guess. In terms of him retiring, he was signed through the 2027 season. So he's going to be here until at least then, I would assume. I would be very, very surprised if they just outright fire him before that's done, unless the situation that I just talked about happened. So what would it take? Like if they lose the rest of their games this year, maybe. But I think that you and I both know that that's very likely not going to happen. So I don't know. I think that there would really have to be like players in the locker room that are like, look, man, this isn't working. Like that go to Art and Omar, like we need something else. Like this just isn't working. And I just don't know if that's going to happen. So many guys in there, TJ's been pretty vocal about, wanting to play for Mike, and Cam the same thing. So
well, and then like all of the like Mike Tomlin talking points gets amplified through the media. Like it's not like if you're a Browns player, like the Browns get shit on so much by the media. Like even when they do like a completely normal thing, they like you can gaslight the locker room into like wanting a guy fired, right? Like it's not that hard. With Mike Tomlin, it's the exact opposite, where it's like you might like if you're Najee Harris and you're like, man, like it feels like we fucking suck and we're not as good as we need to be. Yeah. They gaslight you into being like, you're wrong, get in line with the Tomlinism, right? Like it works in a complete opposite direction for Mike Tomlin. And it's like, for me, the only thing I can see that's going to get him out the paint, he has to take like a big swing. Like, do you think he is at the point of his run where he is desperate enough to end this playoff streak to where he's willing to do some kind of massive swing here to get, like, because it's been like safe but more aggressive swings every offseason. Do you think at some point, like if this year they get smacked in the playoffs in the first round by like the Chargers, I don't know who it would take. Like who's the worst team that can beat you in the first round? The Chargers?
Well, here's the thing. I'll say this: if they do squander this whole thing and they end up not winning the division, like that's going to put a whole other level of fire on it, because they were 4-1 at one point. Baltimore was 1-5. Like, you choke that away, man. Like, what else is there to see? Like, for me, that like you pointed out, for me, my patience are like, I'm already past it. I would have let him go after 2024. But for the Steelers fan base, and I think for the ownership group as a whole, like you're sitting there 3 games ahead of the Ravens, and you can't hold on to that. Like there has to be at least a conversation of like, all right, Art, like we got to do something, because you can't let that happen. But I agree. If both those things happen, let's say that they don't win the division this year, they squander it and Baltimore comes back and wins it. Let's say they're the 6th seed. They have to go on the road to play either Baltimore or whoever wins the AFC South, depending on what happens in the AFC East with Buffalo or New England, whoever it is. And they have to go on the road and they lose, and it's a convincing loss again. All of that combined into one thing, man, that would have to be the end. Like, if it's not, then fans are going to revolt more than they ever have. And that's saying a lot, because I would say it's like 80-20 Steelers fans that are like 80% want him gone, 20% still defend him. And maybe that's even a low number for how many people